All right, today is January 5th, 1975, and I'm interviewing Dr. Sidney Burke, B-U-R-K-E, in Bronx, New York. The first question I wanted to ask you was how and when and under what circumstances did you become a chaplain's assistant?
Well, I was a physician in the 10th Field Hospital. At which time Rabbi Klausner came to perform the religious service.
Do you remember when this was exactly?
I have no recollection of the time anymore. I can remember the place.
Yeah.
I can still see the place that we started in, but more than that, I can't just tell you exactly where. It's my opinion at that time that we're still in Dachau. That we, in fact, I'm almost sure it was in Dachau that he came to me. And at that time, I was in charge of sorting the patients. Who we could do something with and who we couldn't.
I see. Did you work with Dr. Marcus?
No, Dr. Greenberg, who we found later on. No, I was with my own unit.
I see.
The 10th Field Hospital. We worked right in there. We took over that after we had moved in to that area. When that was taken over by the infantry, we went in to try to salvage, see what we could do, and that's where we worked. One unit of our 3 platoons went in to work there, and I was one of them.
I see.
At that time, Rabbi Klausner came, and by his wonderful ways, he was able to talk our colonel into loaning him 10 ambulances, 2 jeeps, and a lot of other equipment that he was able to get from him. And all I'm going to say is that our colonel was not very favorable to Jews.
Do you know who this colonel was? Do you remember his name?
Yes, his name was Colonel Ross, R-O-S-S. At any rate, I went with him. I was put on leave from my outfit with him.
At his request?
At his request, to go with him to see what we could do. And we went to various camps in the neighborhood. I did the same job I had done in Dachau. I tried to decide who we could possibly save, who looked halfway decent at these various places that we went to. And they had taken chest x-rays of all of them because there was a tremendous amount of pulmonary tuberculosis among them. They were just dying like flies from tuberculosis then. And we sorted them out. And by the use of our ambulances, we transported these people to various places.
Could you be specific about the places that you went? You don't remember where?
No, I can just see the camps, but I don't know the names.
So you went to camps outside of Dachau, various...
Outside of Dachau area, that's right.
And now where did you transport the
to various hospitals in the areas, which he was able to get.
So you're talking about St. Attilian and others, and
Probably.
2 others.
Yes, there were 2. Yes, there were 2 others in which he was able to get for the use.
He got this before you became involved with him.
Well, sometimes while I was with him, he was getting 1 or 2. He managed to do things when I don't know when we ever slept. I really don't. I really don't ever know when he slept because I know we would get back to my outfit about 12 o'clock at night and he would disappear. And he would be there early the next morning for us to start all over again. He would have breakfast with us and then off we'd go for the rest of the day. And very often he would lead the group of ambulances over to the area where we had decided we could pick up some patients.
So in other words, if I can understand correctly, the format was you had these ambulances at your disposal,
Right.
and every day you went out to various other areas and to get as many people as possible
Right.
back into these hospitals which he had somehow gotten.
Right.
Now, can you be specific about, or if you can, about how he might have gotten a hospital here or there? Do you
No.
remember any incidents about?
No. All I know is his persuasion was that of getting the governments, the local governments, to give him things.
Do you remember which methods he used in order to do that?
No. All I remember going there with him, and he would come out and say, we got this hospital, or we got this place to put patients into. And then we would go and to the various camps and gather up what we could.
Mm-hmm.
More important, I think, the thing he did was not so much the gathering up, but he gathered up names. He managed to find someone who could read and write, and he would get paper, pencil, typewriters, and whatnot, and make a list
Mm-hmm.
of all the people in this camp, all the people in that camp, all the people in the next, where they thought their relatives were, what were the names of the relatives that they thought might still be alive. And in that way he had these mimeographed, or isn't any Xerox at the time, he would have a mimeographed on wherever he could, and he managed to find places to do it at our own units. He had them mimeographed and sent out to the various places, and he always could find someone who acted as a leader in these camps.
Mm-hmm.
And when he would get a leader, he would give them a list, and they would check and cross-check who was here and who was there. And then, by the use of the 2 jeeps that we had, he would even take people to go to their friends or relatives, whoever they knew, at these other camps. I think that was one of the biggest things he ever did. And if he promised that he would look in such a town for such a person, he looked to see if he could find such a person in such a town for them.
Mm-hmm.
Or if someone knew that maybe someone in the town knew something about the whereabouts of children, he would go down there and try to get it all out and then come back with the information.
Mm-hmm.
He spent a lot of time, I remember, just trying to get the information for people wherever he could. And he had a wonderful way of making up these lists, which he was able to distribute all over. And I know of a lot of people who did find their relatives in that way.
Mm-hmm.
A strange thing, only about a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
some man was at Temple, and he introduced me to him and said, this man has our picture. And it was my picture with Rabbi Klausner.
Mm-hmm.
And the man wanted to know who the other person was in there. And of course, here I was. And I didn't see Rabbi Klausner after the war. I had been in the service 4.5 years, so I was sent home. With the result of being sent home, just disappeared. I never heard from him again. But one day at the temple here in the Bronx, which I was a member, I had a flyer that we were going to have a exchange rabbi at our pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized the name and went down to see him. It was at the temple I then belonged to. And he recognized me. I just mentioned, well, I don't think I'm going to make you try to figure out who I am. He says, but I know you. And it took about 2-3 minutes, and he knew exactly who I was. And as you know, he has the pulpit in Yonkers, and we had moved to Yonkers, so we joined Temple.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, that's about the only thing I can tell you about it. Unless you have some other questions.
Yes, well, how long were you with the rabbi?
About 6 months.
Now, do you remember any other specific incidents that may have happened after this period of time? In other words, you talked about getting supplies.
Right.
You talked about
food was the big thing.
Okay, fine.
What did he do?
Yeah.
He would request, use that term, from various supply houses, ordinances, food, and he would get the various organizations to sign a supply slip. For example, he got my colonel to put down for food, which we just transported in our own trucks to these camps. And this was American food for American GIs, which he was, how he ever managed to talk these colonels into, or this particular colonel, into signing these supply forms for him. And he did. Now, it was just his persuasive ways and his, well, I'm sure they saw how diligent he was in what he was doing. That they just couldn't resist, and they did give it to him.
He never did anything illegally?
Nothing. Well, I wouldn't call it illegal.
Well, I mean...
oh, yes, we would requisition things, but I don't...
Specific?
No.
Well, he told me about it.
Yeah,
so.
I know. Oh, he requisitioned things, I know. I don't know how, as I said, I still don't know how he managed to talk my colonel into giving him these things, whether he got an order from somebody else and managed to get this, but my colonel gave nobody anything, not even his staff.
But the rabbi was able to do it.
Oh, yes, he sure was.
And aside from food, now, why was there a need for food?
Because there was no food in Germany itself.
Well,
they had no local foods. He was able to get, now if you, as I recall things, he was able to get a mayor or whoever it was in charge of a town to give him supplies that were in the warehouses, stores that were still there for the, whether it was for the people in the neighborhood or it was for the German supplies. He managed to get them, and he would get these big warehouses full of food and bring them in.
What do you think would have happened had he not been able to do that?
I think they just would have starved, or they would have gone out and pilfered all around. That's the only way they would have been able to eat, because no one...
the army wasn't providing food?
No. We provided for just the patients in there. The army provided us at Dachau, but they didn't provide for any of these other camps at all. They were self-run institutions. We just took care of patients. Our job was, we went into the Dachau concentration camp and tried to salvage whatever we could of patients. And
so there was enough food for the people in Dachau.
Right.
But how many people are we talking about in the outside?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in these various camps. There were hundreds of them.
So he really saved lives.
A tremendous number. I remember that we went out, and I come from an Orthodox background, and I couldn't understand how he would ride. And we drove up Erev Yom Kippur to have services. And I looked at him, and I said, how can you do it? He says, what difference does it make? We're going. And some of these elderly Jewish people actually looked at him, but when he brought the food, they overlooked all the fact that we rode on Shabbos, that we did all of these other things, but...
well, you were saving lives.
Oh, well, yeah, that's right. We were getting out to them. It didn't matter whether it was Friday or Saturday.
And no other groups were out there? Nobody cared?
As far as I could see, there was nobody else helping except the self-help these people got. And the few we remember that some of these people would leave these camps and go to some of the German houses and just go in there and take whatever they wanted. But on the whole, he was able to keep them there and keep them in food. And they had a regular order of government. They had to, someone in charge, and someone was in charge of cooking, someone was in charge of storing the food, and so forth. They had no real facilities for cooking except whatever they could find in whatever area they were in. But some of them were in the backwoods, some were in the city itself, where these people had congregated. Now, how they even got there, we never knew. At least I never knew. But we do know that we moved from place to place. And again, how he ever found some of these places, it was only that we went to one place and they would tell us, we know that there are a number of Jews up in here, hiding up in the hills. We're waiting for the Americans to come in. They're hiding up in the hills. And they would give us an idea where it was, and he would ferret out this group. And when they realized he had his Star of David on, they would come out, and they just helped to find the rest of them.
Do you remember the camp at Feldefing?
Again, names I don't remember. I did try to see if I could find for you some of the letters that I had sent to my wife.
Yeah.
But we weren't very successful. We were up until about 1 or 2 o'clock last night looking for pictures. The same pictures that are in a bulletin that came out at the Dachau concentration camp, which I'm sure everybody has, of all the bodies and so forth. I had the same thing, and I don't know where my own are. We look for them, but of course I become very distressed every time I see them, so I don't like to take them out.
I understand. But if you could find the letters, that would be extremely helpful.
Well, we are still going to look for the letters. As I said, we've been in this home for 20-odd years, and as a result, they have been put away. And though we do have them because they're on V-mail, and they were very small, and my wife kept all the letters I had sent in from overseas, so that they probably are around, and if we do come across them, I'm going to send folks that without any problem at all. Send them on to you. If any of them will give us places and dates, which I'm sure I must have written home that I had been traveling with him.
Now, do you remember other type of experiences that you may have had with him with regard, let's say, to the food situation? Was there anything else in this area?
No, not that I remember, except, as I said, his getting of the food for them.
Are you familiar with the underground that he had set up? That is, he had sent people into Eastern Europe, and they were able to bring back people?
That's right. That was part of the lists that he had, in which he would make this list, and these people told him where the families were, and as I mentioned, he was able to go into some towns, or they told him that the children were in a certain town, and by getting to the mayor and so forth, he was able to find the children very often. And I did see some of the families at our temple one time whom he had gotten together, and he did bring back to the temple one time.
Now, but I'm talking specifically from Eastern Europe. Where,
yes, well, I don't remember specific things, but I do remember well that he did send people through. He managed to get the money. He managed, and I don't know how he managed the money, but he managed it, and he managed transportation for them some way or other, and they did bring them back.
What about the passport system that he had devised illegally?
Yes. Well, I had nothing to do with that at all, but I knew of it. But that's all.
Well, that's also important.
Yeah, well, I knew about it, but I was unable to do anything for him in that score.
What was your primary function?
My primary function was medical.
Mm-hmm.
We would go in, we had a certain number of ambulances, we had a certain number of beds. And in some of these units, they had taken x-rays of them. And I went over a lot of the x-rays to see how far advanced some of the tuberculosis was in some. And when it was so far advanced that it was a hopeless situation, we didn't take them. And it was a terrible decision. One particular time was, I don't recall whether it was Erev Rosh Hashanah or was it Erev Yom Kippur. I can't remember either which one it was, but I do remember we were trying to do all this before it got dark, and we were going to take them out anyhow, and it was just before the holiday. And
this must have been 1945.
well, somewhere
Yeah, because if Dachau was liberated in April,
yes,
then we're talking about 6 months from
That's
that
right.
period of time. Okay.
and that's about where we were, I remember.
Okay.
And we had to make a big decision. We only had so many beds that's all that would be allowed, and it was a matter of who we should take and who were the chances of getting well and so forth. This is the big thing that I had, that's all.
So there were people that you just simply, they were beyond hope.
Beyond hope, and we just had to leave, and it was just like a tragic thing of saying there's no hope for you, we can't take you. But we never said that.
Yeah.
We said, and he never allowed me to say anything like, oh, we'll be back for you, and then not come back.
Right.
One of the things he insisted on, if we say anything, we're going to do it. In other words, he said he would bring a list. He brought a list. If he said he was going to come back with ambulances, he came back with them. If he said he would get them food, he did it. He never made them a promise and never kept it. In other words, they didn't have to feel that he would ever let them down, and they really had tremendous faith in him, and they did everything for him. Or
Yeah,
anything
for
that,
example.
well, I mean, if he would send a man out and he could give him money, he didn't have to worry what was going to happen to that money. That money would be used for what he told him to do it for. And you have to realize there were some real good connivers in the groups. Otherwise, they would not have been alive.
Right.
And some of the things that these people were able to find in the city was remarkable. Money, jewelry, diamonds, anything that came back. We were amazed sometimes at some of the things that came back.
And so he used this.
He used this money for use of something else. The one thing I can always be sure of, that he never used it for himself. That all foods, money, and so we still ate K-rations. We never ate there except our own K-rations. That's all we had for days on end, except when we went back to my unit or he went back to some other unit and he ate there.
But you never took the food.
Never took the food that we brought in. Any food we brought in, we never ate. We never ate. Not that, well, maybe we were afraid at the time, maybe we weren't. It wasn't that we were really afraid.
What do you mean
We were
afraid?
Afraid to eat the food, you know, that there may be some contamination. That wasn't our thing. The idea was that the food we're bringing them is for these people. They need it more than we do. We'll stay with our K-rations. We were still on K-rations, and that's what we were eating. In fact of the matter is, even at Dachau, our food for the patients was food for the patient. There was an armed guard on that. We still ate K-rations. They may have had hot food where we didn't, but it didn't matter.
Well, there in Dachau, it was an administrative decision, whereas
Right.
with you and the rabbi,
Rabbi, it was our own
was
decision.
your own decision.
Well, I'll say it was his decision.
Okay. Now, do you remember the Central Committee of Liberated Jews that he established? Were you involved with that in any way?
No, except the fact that I remember him doing it, but I wasn't involved with it because I never knew when I had to get back to the outfit. I couldn't stay with him. It was only while we were staying at Dachau that I was allowed to go with him.
I see.
The minute my outfit was to leave, I had to go.
Right.
And
Did you ever wonder why he was able to move around the way he did?
well, all I could feel was the fact that this man had a way of saying the right thing and getting all the things that he wanted. We had all the gas we wanted, and he drove the Jeep himself.
Which
And
was
most
against
times was against regulations.
and he was seen by other people.
Always, and nothing ever happened. He didn't even let me drive. He drove all of the time. Night and day we drove very often. And we would start early in the morning. When I say 8, I really believe it was somewhere in the 7s
Mm-hmm.
that we got started. And we very often came home in the blackout. And we had to drive in the blackout all the way through.
And then he was back again the next
He was
morning.
back in the next morning. Very often he would sleep over, but we rarely slept at the camps. We just always managed to come home, regardless of the hour.
Mm-hmm. That was because of you?
I don't know whether it was that or it was a rule that he put up for himself, that he was going to come home, but I don't ever remember sleeping at any of the camps at all. We always managed to find our way home.
So you would say for 6 months you and the rabbi were running around like this? Or was there did this period of running around stop and something else took place?
No, that was all that took place all the time.
Continually?
I'm not so sure that it was a full 6 months, but it was...
Well, close to that.
Yeah, it was
We're
a
talking-
period of time, and it's a long time ago, and I've tried my darndest to forget it all,
I see, I understand.
because it still bothers me.
Now, there was a package program that Rabbi Klausner set up. Are you familiar with that? You must have been involved with that to some degree.
I was involved to some degree, but I don't recall it. I remember it, but again, details I don't.
Okay, well, if I can kind of refresh your memory,
Yeah.
they spoke to GIs,
Hmm.
Jewish GIs, and asked them to please write home and request that packages be sent.
That's quite correct.
Now, the packages came, and do you remember what happened then? How you distributed them? How?
Well, again, we used the trucks and jeeps of our outfit.
And you had these ambulances and trucks and jeeps almost at will?
Well, he would go, they would leave, give it to him for a day or 2 days, whatever he needed, and then he'd leave them there, and then we'd go back whenever he needed them. And he managed to get them each time.
There was never a question of...
Well, there was
having to
always a
wait.
question, but I think he somehow or other always seemed to have a slip of paper that got an okay. I don't know where he got the slip of paper, but he always had a piece of paper. He said we can always use it if we have to.
But he generally tried not to have to.
That's right.
Now, were there any other necessities that you were able to provide to the survivors? Did you ever have... What about medical supplies? That must have been very difficult to get.
Well,
People
again, he did
outside
the
of
same
Dachau.
thing. He did the same thing. He would try to get whatever we could from the outfit, and he would manage to get it from headquarters, depot headquarters. Again, I can't tell you how he did it, because all I know it was there.
You never asked?
No. It was one of those things we would laugh about. We got the supplies
Mm-hmm.
because we had promised supplies. There were some doctors in the various camps who had been prisoners in the camps.
Right.
And when we got the supplies, that's what they used.
Mm-hmm. Well, how was the response of other doctors in Dachau? Were they very helpful?
Well, there was only one other Jewish doctor with me, and he was more or less had to remain there in headquarters because he was the man who did all the headquarter work.
Mm-hmm.
But all the rest, we had no other except the Jewish GIs.
Mm-hmm.
And they helped whenever they could. But actually, all our drivers were non-Jewish.
Mm-hmm. And they
No
helped them.
objections, no objections. They came. To them, it was didn't matter because they got out of camp.
I see.
They could go do what they want. Everybody, once you got out of camp, you or out of this area, you just forage for yourself.